What if you grew up in a belief system that told you everything around you was an illusion? What if you were told everything that happened to you, from being sick to stubbing a toe to being bullied at school, was your fault for not knowing the truth? What if you were denied even the most basic health care, from pain pills to checkups to vaccinations? How do you unravel yourself from this belief system? And what happens when you do? My name is Hillary Alexander, and this is Leaving Christian Science. Welcome to episode 4 of Leaving Christian Science. Today I'm talking with Morgan, who's going to tell us all about their experience with Christian Science, what it took to get out, how it feels to be out now, what it was like being in. So why don't you go ahead and tell us the beginning. When did Christian Science start in your family?
Sure. So I don't know exactly. I was born into Christian Science. Both of my parents identified as Christian Scientists, though I don't know that they do now. But I think it's more like a freeform Unitarian kind of thing, which is not that Unitarian is, but that they're kind of following the same patterns and stuff in other ways with different titles, different names. But I think that, so I know that my mom's mom was in Christian Science, and then I'm pretty sure that my dad's mom was in Christian Science or something, but since we don't talk about family, I don't know for sure. So but yeah, as far as so I spent my entire childhood in Christian Science, and then through an interesting series of events, kind of the butterfly effect, I started working at a Renaissance fair when I was 15, turning 16, and met a bunch of dirty heathens there. So kind of got exposure to more of the world and got to talk to interesting people, and that kind of helped me realize that this is not maybe what's what. And but I would never say that I was especially like a believer. It just kind of was what was around. I didn't know anything else. So
yeah. So you didn't go to like Christian Science schools or camps or anything like that?
I did go to camp. I went to Cedars Camp in Missouri. I didn't go to Christian Science schools, but we went to church every Sunday, and many Wednesdays my dad ended up getting brought on as the second reader. So that was like a whole thing. And actually my best friend in church's mom was first reader. So the two of us were like, hey, trying to play hangman in the back pew without getting caught. You know?
Right. But you were like me, you were lucky to have sort of outside of the church a normal childhood with exposure to non-Christian Scientists. Like it wasn't your whole world like it is for some people. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Really a good thing to help you get out is always having had the knowledge of like, not everybody thinks like this, and there's probably a reason for that.
Exactly. I remember sleeping over at a school friend's house on a Saturday night, and my mom was like, oh, I mean, you can just go to church with them in the morning. Because, it wasn't like other religions didn't exist, which was, but like, I remember being like, oh, I don't want to be Lutheran. They have to go to church at 8 in the morning. Ours starts at 10.
Yeah. So was your family radical reliant, as we call it, like no medicine?
I want to say yes, but it actually, like, as I've been discovering repressed memories and decoding a lot of stuff that I understood as true and kind of things like that with an adult mindset now, adult understanding of stuff, we got our eyes checked on the regular. Both my parents wore glasses. We got our eyes checked regularly, and we went to the dentist religiously.
Yeah, we did too.
Yeah,
my mother wore glasses. We always went to the dentist. We got the painkillers for dentistry.
We got Novocaine. We got Novocaine, which I found out later I'm immune to. Oh, no. So, did you know that pain medicine, when you get a shot like that, I thought that it was just supposed to take the edge off, and then you just kind of get used to how excruciating it was. But apparently that's not everyone's experience.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm immune or resistant to a lot of things, which is super fun to discover now. Like being allergic to penicillin was fun to learn as an adult.
Wow.
Yeah, not
Yeah,
ideal.
so you had eye checks, you had normal dentistry, just no medical, no vaccinations, no pain pills, things like that.
Yeah, I had my first painkiller when I was like 16. It was a single ibuprofen for cramps that a friend gave me because they were like, "Do you want something?" And I'm like, "Meh." And for a long time, I was proud of my incredibly high pain tolerance. But then I came to realize, like, oh, that's a terrible thing to have because pain is your body saying that something's the matter. So that was a problem. Like I'm currently dealing with like some pretty severe issues. I injured my eye while I was up visiting my sister. I think in 2001, and went to the hospital and everything. This was, long past when I stopped following Christian Science. But it is assumed that when that happened, I possibly had some like whiplash that kind of went undetected because it was so minor. And so I've got two discs that are in super bad shape that I didn't get addressed when it started hurting. But I also don't know exactly when it started hurting because I was taught forever to ignore it. So when a doctor says, like, well, when did this happen? I can't give them an accurate idea. And when they say, like pain scales are super hard for me. I actually keep one on my phone
Wow.
so that I can check in with it because it's got a very detailed, this is what a 2 means, this is what a 3 means, and I just go by that. One of my sisters and I have an understanding that, like, if it's a 0.5, you round up, and a 7, you go to the hospital. Like, those are the rules because we just don't have,
Wow.
yeah, we just don't know. So
Yeah,
that's
Christian
fun.
scientists, ex-Christian scientists, we have such a complicated relationship with pain because we don't really understand it. We don't know how to describe it to people that are trying to help us. And then we also, and I hate this part, but we're kind of proud of how much suffering we endured, you know?
Yeah,
It's this
it's
twisted badge of honor that I'm tough.
yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, like, I got my vaccines when I was 26, and I mean, I that's it's one of my solid foundational rules now. Like, you get vaccinated, you vote, and you try not to be a dick. Like, those are the rules of my persona because
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's so easy to be, I don't know, like a Christian Scientist light, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Like, even if you're like, well, I don't really believe in it anymore, but you don't still do anything about it. Like, you don't learn about your body, you don't go to doctors and get checkups, you don't get vaccinated, you don't educate yourself and stuff like that. You're kind of still a Christian Scientist because you're not addressing things,
Yeah.
but or acknowledging them. And it's so dangerous. I think that's the most frustrating thing for me is it's not even that, like, yeah, my childhood and everything, but as an adult, it's so dangerous because, like, we weren't taught that the seriousness of head injuries.
Yeah.
Like, if you, like, I was always like, oh yeah, because I was a really rough and tumble kind of kid and still am to a degree. It's like, oh, I've never had a concussion. Joking. I've been, hit and fallen and hit my head and stuff. No big deal. People are like, yeah. And then offhand, somebody was like, anytime that you get hit in the head and you, like, lose consciousness for any amount of time, that's definitely a concussion. And I'm like, oh no. And all my friends are like, is that number different now?
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah, that's
gosh.
the scary part, is to think of all the things that we endured that will pop up later. I've
Yeah.
definitely been wondering lately because I have some super minor hearing things. And I know that I had a lot of untreated ear infections as a little kid. And I'm like, I wonder if it's related to that. I'll
Yeah.
never know, but you just wonder, like, what starts popping up much later that you ignored at the time,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
scares me.
It's so scary. Like, I've got issues with my feet, like I have forever, and I still don't really know what it is, but, like, I rode in a stroller till I was 7 because it hurt to walk around,
Mm,
and that was just okay.
yeah.
And like even and when I was 7, I turned 18 and, like, went immediately to see a podiatrist. Like, that was the first person I went to go see, and he didn't have any answers. And I've seen like 5 now, because they're still this and then the other, and mixed experiences, because not all doctors are the same quality, but even if there's nothing that could have been fixed, like me, even if it's an issue that like science, modern medicine can't, like, doesn't know, can't fix, or it's just like, well, that's you. It could have been mitigated, like I wear insoles now. I have certain shoes that, they don't bend in the middle, so I have more stability and stuff. So it's just frustrating that like you think about it just in like raw scientific terms, and that like pain and fear and anything like that causes the release of that, was it cortisol? Or cortisone, yeah, chemical, which like stops certain development, stops the release of other endorphins, and causes disruption to your system. So anybody who's got like lasting trauma, anybody, kids with like fighting parents, or, anything like that causes that. But if it continues, like, it can give you lasting problems. And so I wonder about like all these kids that grew up in Christian Science who just were in pain and taught to ignore it. Like I was telling and it's just, it sneaks up on you, right? Like I was telling my sister a story of playing D&D a Saturday night, and it was late, and we were taking a break, and there's a Burger King across the parking lot, and I was goofing around, and I was running around towards it, and the parking lot was dark, and I slipped in some oil, and I hurt my leg. And so we're like, so we kind of continued on, limped in there. My brother went to go order, burger for me, and I went to the bathroom to kind of clean up my leg, and I put my leg up on the counter, up on the sink, and it was, how it is, like, infinitely worse. And then your brain sees it. It's like, oh, this kind of stings. And then your brain's like, oh, I'm dying.
Yeah.
It hurts so much more. And it was so bad. Like I'm trying to, like, I was probably 12 or 13, and I'm trying to like pick gravel out of my leg, and it was so messed up. And then I went to church the next morning, and it's, I mean, not to be too graphic, but like it's like oozing and bleeding into my sock, plasma, and I would look down at it constantly, because I'm a child, and it hurts so bad. And of course, as it's trying to scab and it's just exposed, it doesn't have any moisturizing, anything that I'm putting on it. So it's just, it hurts every time those scabs. It was horrible. And every time I looked at it, my Sunday school teacher would be like, oh, but just look at your other leg and know that that's what that one looks like. And I'm like, okay. And so I dutifully did that. But I'm telling my sister the story, and she was like, I just don't know how you didn't get an infection. And Hillary, it blew my mind, because it never occurred to me that I could have gotten an infection even. Like, oh my God.
Yeah.
How did I die of an infection? What's in that parking lot?
How
like,
bad that could have been. Yeah.
Oh, I could have lost my leg, and I mean, now of course there's no scars or anything, but it was bad. And I just think about stuff like that, just randomly, falling out of a tree and hitting every branch on the way down. I couldn't put my arms down for 3 days. And it's like, just all the little pieces that get added in and thrown in. And yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah. And then having the psychological part of either being told to ignore it or telling yourself to ignore it, or both, which I'm sure we all did both.
Yeah. And just feeling like a failure at all times.
Yeah. It's always
just
your fault. What did you do?
Yeah, you're not believing hard enough because you can't change reality. And
I mean, my mother's thing with me, and with herself too, I'm sure, was always, what did you do to cause this? Which is not unique to Christian Science. There are plenty of other groups that have that thought of everything that happens to you is your fault, and you need to look within yourself to figure out what you did or thought. But that I get so riled up when I think about that, because it's so frustrating and infuriating.
Yeah, like, what did I do to cause this? I was joyously running around with my friends on my way to get food from our celebratory fantasy game.
Yeah.
Like, I was climbing a tree with my buddy, which is a very childhood thing to do. When I was climbing around in the gutter, in the sewers, I didn't get hurt at all. So that must have been fun.
Yeah, that was okay somehow. I mean, it's just, to be constantly blamed, and to constantly be told to look within yourself to see what you're just searching and searching and searching for, well, maybe I thought something bad about somebody once, or maybe it's exhausting.
And you learn I'm a firm believer that lying is a very healthy and important skill for humans to have, just in general, like, but I mean, you learn to lie about things that you should not be lying. You learn to lie about being in pain. You learn to gaslight, because to gaslight yourself constantly, like, oh no, I'm fine, and you're like, I must be, and it really does miss you. But also, like, so when I was 14, my mom was in a really horrible car accident, and my mom had a really terrible childhood growing up, and she had told us multiple times that if not for Christian Science, she didn't know how she would have survived. And so, of course, like, I can't even be mad at that, because of course, if you feel like this thing saved your life, like, of course you would want to give this tool to your children to save them from the world, right? But I mean, she was in this, like, really, it was bad. It was really bad. And I mean, I remember it was on a Sunday, and my dad was the reader, and my closest brother is 2.5 years older than me, and he calls us in. My dad calls us in, and he's like, "Okay, your mom called me. She's had a wreck. I'm gonna go get her. I'm gonna take, and just the seriousness of his tone, we knew, like, it was scary. And he's like, "We're gonna go home. You're gonna make, my brother. You're gonna make dinner. You're gonna do your homework." Like, just kind of assigning, this is how the night's gonna look like. Okay, and he goes and gets my mom, and I just remember, like, standing, because she's really short, but she's always been, large personality and stuff. And I just remember watching her go up the stairs with at least one broken rib for sure. Mm. And my dad kind of, like, spotting, walking up behind, and she was taking each stair so slowly, and my brother just kind of, like, puts an arm around me, and and it was terrifying. And it was, like, months. I don't know how long it took for her to recover from that, but, like, months. And no, there's nothing that you can do to fix a broken rib medically. I mean, other than wrap it, so getting it secured, and it's extraordinarily painful. It's me breathe, right? But you don't have to be in pain that whole time, and I think about, like, when you are hurt, how much more difficult everything is. Like, when you've cut your hand, you're trying to do the dishes, you're trying to fold laundry, you're trying to cook for yourself, just taking care of yourself, let alone taking care of others. And I'm like, what a nightmare. Like, all these parents with, in Christian Science, trying to raise their kids, and they're in pain and struggling, and they're terrified. And I think that that's another thing that upsets me about Christian Science so much, is how much it relies on fear, and it feeds on fear.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I know I'm dominating, but I have a lot of stories. I wanted to volunteer at the zoo, and to do that, I had to get a tuberculosis test. Kind of, it's a standard, no way to get around it, no religious exemption or nothing. And so my mom kind of hemmed and hawed, and finally said yes. And I don't know if you've ever had a TB test is nothing. I mean, you get a shot, and it's a shot. I mean, it's a prick, and it hurts, kind of that little sting. And then they look to see if you have a reaction, basically. And I'm 14, and this is the first shot I've ever had in my life. And I don't know that my mom ever got a shot ever, right? And so she's shaking with fear.
Wow.
And, like, close to tears. And so I'm taking my cues off of her, and I'm like, am I about to die? Like, is this poison? Like, oh my God. And so I can't imagine what she was going through, let alone, and so, like, it was so traumatic, and it was also nothing.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. And so, again, with the kind of, like, Christian Science light, if you just don't do anything and you're just afraid, like, she didn't want me to be an organ donor when I got my license, because she thought that they would let me die on the side of the road so that they could harvest my organs.
Get the organs.
That's not
how it works.
Not how it works. And I didn't know that. I didn't know how it worked. So I, looked into it. I researched it. I educated myself. And so it's just one of those things that, like, it encourages ignorance.
Yeah.
In an area that you really shouldn't be ignorant, like.
Yeah. And fear is way beyond reality in some cases, like with the shots thing. I've told this story before on here, that my first shots I got when I had my first baby at 39. That was the first shot, the first needle that had ever been in my body. And I was terrified. I was afraid I was going to be allergic. I was going to have some reaction and die. I mean, all this stuff that was, it's not impossible, but it's extremely unlikely, and I had to just talk to the nurse. Of course, I was embarrassed to have to admit, like, okay, so here's the deal.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they were very kind to me. I actually used the term I was raised by wolves. I said, sorry, okay, so raised by wolves. I've never been vaccinated against anything. Can you just explain it to me? Like, if I start to have a reaction, what does it look like? What should I look out for just so I don't get hurt? And they were very kind, again, because I think they probably encounter that pretty
More than you
regularly.
want. Yeah.
So, and I got all the shots to keep my baby safe and to keep me safe. And I was just like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, it was like a little like sewing needle.
Yeah.
I mean,
like, we haven't done worse to ourselves trying to fix things that we probably should have gone at, like.
It was so crazy. I was like, that's it. That's the thing that I've lived in terror of for 39 years.
Yeah, anytime I'm going to a new doctor, like for a one-off or something like that, when they ask about my back, my family history, I just put a line through it, and I just write adopted. Yeah. Because that's just easier than trying to explain. Yeah, than trying to explain it. And if it's a more long-term, like a PCP, or anything like that, a doctor I'm going to be seeing more regularly, then I'm like, all right, here's the deal. And I have to lay it out for him. Like, I'm not, I'm not stupid. I'm just unexposed. I just don't. So I'm going to ask. So please don't assume any kind of baseline knowledge.
Yeah.
But, I'll let you know. And I'm the queen of asking questions. I will ask every question in the world. I record my appointments so that I can listen to it later if in case I have any questions or I didn't understand something. But I mean, when I got my first woman's wellness examination, I wasn't married, but I was dating, and I completely shut down. I had a panic attack. I don't know why I didn't take a friend with me, but it was terrifying. It was so invasive, and it was so upsetting and they were confused. Like, why are you freaking out? You're, an adult. You've definitely had these before, and they didn't understand, and I couldn't explain, and I just shut down, and it's horrible. And then when I was able to kind of talk to my doctor about that experience, and she was so helpful, and she was like, nope, this is everything this is, explaining every tool, explaining everything like that, everything I might experience. And it was great, and it's fine. And it takes 15 seconds and everything's great, but like, why did I have to go through that?
Yeah. I mean, I hate to admit that even after, 10 plus years of being pretty regularly involved with medical stuff now because of having 2 kids and being older, and I get my checkups, I get my mammograms, like I still have to kind of calm myself because it's still scary. And yeah. I'm one of those people that they take my blood pressure and it's super high and they have to wait a minute. They call it white coat syndrome. You're afraid of doctors. And I'm like, yeah, externally, I don't feel afraid, but it's in there and it's making my blood pressure go up. It's still, I have to like do breathing exercises to get through each doctor appointment so I don't panic.
I'll have a headache. At one point I asked my friends, on Facebook or something, and I was like, how many days of having a headache should you wait before going to a doctor? And so many of my friends were like, I think if you're asking that, you should go.
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, did you take anything? And I have to pause and be like, oh, no, I didn't, But like, I found out only in the last 10 years that I'm allergic to penicillin and I'm allergic to NSAIDs. So like, I can't take ibuprofen or, Aleve, anything like that. It causes excruciating stomach pain. And I mean, that wasn't fun to find out, like,
an adult.
Oh my God. Yeah, I found it out because I started dating my boyfriend, and he's a mono carrier, and so he gave me mono, and I didn't know what was going on, but it was also mid-October, and I was working in the haunted houses. I worked, that season, and haunted house actors are notorious for kind of chest and throat infections, things like that, because you're up close with the public, you're snarling and tearing up your voice, so everything's kind of raw and open, and you're not, and a lot of times if it's an outside haunt, it's cold, and things like that. So I just thought, so I went to the doctor because I was feeling like garbage, and they found, just a clinic, and they found a throat infection, and so they were like, all right, throat infection, steroid pack, and they gave me penicillin something, in that family. And so I go home, like, all right. And when the steroid pack ran out, that penicillin was able to hit my system, and I woke up in the night trying to basically scratch the skin off my legs.
Wow.
And I go in the mirror, and I've got these horrible hives and rash, like my whole body, and I don't know any better. So I assume that it's a medical, like a medicine reaction. But I don't know. I didn't know enough to stop taking it, because if I'm sick, I should take the medicine.
You're
right?
still taking it. Yeah.
So I took another dose that morning before the clinic opened, and I could call them, and they were like, okay, stop. And I'm like, okay. So I go back. They give me this topical cream, but it's my whole, medicated topical cream, but it's my whole body. So of course I'm like making myself sick with that, trying to get these hives to calm down. And finally, I go back a third time. So it's like a month and a half of this. I go back a third time, and this different doctor diagnosed. She's like, I'm going to take a blood test. And it turns out it was mono. So I had a throat infection and mono, right? But even then, so, they were able to explain it, but I had to wait weeks. I mean, there's nothing you can do once it's in your system. You got to wait for it to get out, and it takes a while. So I was all covered in hives. It was horrible. But even then, I didn't understand that what they were saying people can be allergic to penicillin. And I was like, yes, okay. But the way that they phrased it was that like a very small percentage of the population who has mono can react to penicillin with full body rashes because of your allergy you're already allergic. So then it shows like this. But I didn't connect that. So I didn't think I was allergic to penicillin. So a couple of years later, something comes up, and I take penicillin again. I don't know.
Yeah.
Amoxicillin, I don't know any better. And then I have another horrible, and of course the next time you take it, it's so much worse.
Oh no.
Oh my God, it was horrible. And it's like, you don't know, right? You can develop allergies day to day. I mean, now you're allergic to celery, which would be a benefit. but I mean, it would have been nice to know what an allergy was.
Yeah, and just how these things work, so you could sort of make some decisions or make some guesses on your own, sort of protect yourself. Yeah. Yeah, the medical ignorance, I was just saying this earlier, like I'm never going to catch up. Like, it's too late for me to have had a normal life in the medical world. Like, I'm always going to be behind all my peers as far as learning this stuff and having the level of like relaxation with it that they do. That may just never happen for me, and I've kind of accepted that. I'm always going to be an immigrant in that world. Yeah,
it's foreign language. I mean, I go to my friends are super cool. They're the ones that I made when I joined that Ren Fair, a lot of them. And so it's half my life that they've known me. But even still, when I told a friend, I got my childhood vaccinations when I was 26, she had this moment where she like looked off into space, and she was like, I never put it together that you didn't get your vaccines because you weren't born in a hospital. And I was like, correct. I was born at home. My mom had all 4 of her kids at home. And she was like, she was basically asking for forgiveness. Like, that if we'd realized that, we would have taken you to get them. Like on your 18th birthday, we would have taken you to get vaccinated. And I'm like, I know. But I mean, it's easy. So I have a really good community where I can go to them and be like, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. Is this just the human experience, or should I see a professional? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, you should see a professional about that.
Yeah.
But, but they're also willing to, like, they'll go with me, or they'll be like, you should ask these questions, and things like that. So it's very helpful. But I kind of like, I just ache for people still living with that fear. Like, I want people to have access to pain management, and it's, and things like that, like, especially finding out that, no, hey, it's not supposed to hurt. Like, it doesn't just take the edge off. Of course, after all of my, I got my teeth like perfect, and then I find out I'm, I'm like, well, That would have been nice. My
Yeah.
dentist over here,
I mean,
like,
it's especially
like
disturbing
horrified.
as
Yeah.
I get older and I realize that, things are going to start going wrong in my body, whether I want them to or not.
Yeah.
But at least I'm going to have the freedom now to seek out care.
Hmm.
And even if it's something that can't be like fixed, I can at least be made comfortable. And it's such a shame that our elders, our parents or grandparents, in some cases, my grandparents were not Christian Scientists, thank goodness. Um, have to go into their older years with so much suffering. And
Yeah.
it's so needless because you're already old.
Yeah, it's not like it's a picnic.
Being old
Like,
is hard enough, even when you're healthy. And then you've
yeah.
got chronic pain and that starts to
Pounds. Yeah.
change your brain. I mean, that's what happened with my mother. Her medical issues, whatever they were, we'll have no idea, started when she was around my age, you know? And so
Yeah.
for 20 years, she suffered terribly. And I know that changed her brain. The chronic illness changes your brain.
It does. It's
Yeah.
it's horrible. It's just upsetting to the nth degree. I mean, I do remember that I do remember my mom telling me, I think vaguely, I don't even remember when, in a distant past, that her mom might have died of stomach cancer. Um and that was extra special terrifying and scary because um I had stomach problems and both of my sisters had stomach problems, and I think my brother made, so like, and I know that my mom had some kind of issue that we didn't know what was going on. And so I brought that up to a doctor, and he was like, okay, it's not impossible, but also, but he was able to kind of alleviate some of that fear where he was like, at that time when somebody passed away and they maybe did an autopsy or anything like that and they found cancer, usually it was like, well, the first place that they looked, maybe, and they found cancer. So it might have been anything else. It could have been breast cancer. It could have been lymph nodes. I mean,
Migrated. Yeah.
right. And it's not like it's extra special comforting, but at least it alleviates some of that possibility. But I mean, and I found out that I make, extra acid, and so I'm on like a medicated antacid, and I'm also found out that I'm allergic to red 40, so I've kind of been eliminating that from my diet. I mean, but it's still like, I mean, I'm still young, but I'm 32 and I've got the problems of my friends are all a decade or more older than me, and I'm still finding out stuff that really could have been addressed 30 years ago. I mean,
I mean, my mother's father, again, not a Christian Scientist, died of, I believe, colon cancer. And there's a certain amount of that in our family. And our mother may have died of that. Like, we'll never know.
Yeah.
But I remember there was a point where when we were still in touch and could talk about these things, I was having some issues around that. And I was thinking maybe I should go get a colonoscopy. And she said, well, if you go get a colonoscopy, they're just going to start finding things. And I was like, that's
People
kind of the point.
So many times, like, they're just gonna find stuff, and I'm like,
yeah,
isn't that what you want? Like, even like whenever something gets found, it's a relief, right? Like, like, I'm not crazy. This is a problem. Like, something is happening. When you go in and you have a problem and they're like, I've had a camera, like trying to figure out everything going on, and they're like, we don't know, we don't see anything that's a problem, and you're like, oh, okay, now what? Like, it's not a comfort to find nothing.
Yeah, having answers is really important, because then at least there's a surprise. It may be an imperfect plan and it may not actually work, but at least there's like steps, other than call a practitioner, know the truth, study the lesson, read 100 years of Christian Science healing, whatever your thing is.
I got so stressed out when I was 19 years old, 19, that I was vomiting blood, and I was still living at home and trying to like not have too many like gory details, but my mom was there, with me, and one of my managers at the restaurant where I was working kind of commented, he was like, you look really pale, you know? And I was like, I don't know. And I just didn't feel good and it was just low energy and stuff. And we went out to dinner and I was laughing with my friends and I remember like a sharp pain in my stomach. And the next day I just felt awful and I ended up throwing up, couldn't stop throwing up, you know, and then threw up so hard my nose was bleeding. And then of course that's going down. And so that, but then I threw up and it was obviously from my stomach, you know, it was kind of, and mom's behind me kind of, you know, handing me toilet paper to kind of help and everything and rubbing my back. And she's so terrified because her daughter's dying for all we know. And thankfully, when I have to vomit, my brain just generally speaking decides that I'm dying and like releases the good endorphins. So I'm always like I'm fine. But this time I was in like severe pain, you know, and everything was hurting so bad. And so she's like, everything's fine, everything's good. And of course, by this time I'm like, no, it's not, you know, I can tell that she's pain. And then she would go downstairs and call the practitioner and she's like screaming for help with, you know, shouting like, I need help. It's like, oh my God, freaking out. And then she'd come back up and be like, no, you're good. Everything's good.
And you can hear her down there freaking out.
No, my dad leaves his job and comes home to sit with, like, it was terrifying. So like, you know, and of course it was probably a bleeding ulcer, which I shouldn't have had at 19. But I mean, I can't imagine the terror that she and my dad went through. My parents were had to have been terrified.
Yeah,
I was, you know, because blood's not supposed to come from there, you know, like, and I just feel like if we'd had the tools, you know, it's like, oh, you look really ill. Okay, maybe let's try this. Do you feel any better? No, I just feel nauseous. Okay. As soon as I start throwing up, as soon as I threw up so hard my nose started bleeding, we got to the hospital.
Yeah,
That'd have been
that
like,
would be a normal reaction. Yeah,
exactly. That'd have been like, hey, maybe you should take this med. Be aware of this. Stop being so stressed out. What's wrong with you? You're 19.
yeah.
I mean, yeah, just a nightmare. So I feel so much for, I mean, all the kids in Christian Science who have had to suffer through this and all the parents in Christian Science who've had to suffer through it, but also just, I mean, that relationship. I'm on an antidepressant and due to a major depressive disorder, and which was great to discover. Like, oh, happiness. It's within reach. If you can't make your own neurotransmitters, store-bought is fine. So I missed a dose on, you know, accidents happen, and I was having a horrible react, you know, your chemicals are off balance and everything's kind of crazy. And I happened to be watching one of the later movies of the Hunger Games. So of course emotions were high. And I slammed a cabinet closed and my hand slipped and I had like, I ended up like cutting myself like on the edge of it, you know, like a friction cut. And I didn't know what was happening yet. I just felt insane. And which I was, and I spent an hour with not a badly bleeding cut, but I mean, it needed tending to. I spent an hour calling to try and find a friend in the middle of the workday who could be on a video call with me so that I could reassure them that I was okay while I bandaged myself up. Because every time that I skinned my knee or hurt, you know, burned my hand or something as a kid, all my mom, you know, my dad knew to do was yell the Bible at me, you know, yell science and health stuff at me, which would then be terrifying, you know, but then I'm having to like reassure them that I'm okay because that fear is just so sharp, you know?
Yeah, like it's not allowed to be about you in that moment. Which it should be. Yeah. Because you're worried about their fear.
And if I was better and if they were better, then this wouldn't have happened. You know, so I'm feeling like a failure and I'm in pain and I'm terrified because my parent is scared. and they feel like a failure and they're terrified, and and like, because they don't know what's happening or how to fix it, and they're just trying to do their best, and like, it's just so circular, and it's just horrible. It's horrible for everybody, and I hate it. I hate it so much.
Well, I mean, when they tell you that as a parent, if your child is injured or sick, that it's something in your thought.
Like, did you have bad thoughts? Did I have bad thoughts about my child and now they're injured? It's like,
yeah. And when you're a kid, you know that.
Right.
So know that your parent is standing there thinking, what did I do to cause this?
Exactly. Exactly. And also, of course you had bad thoughts about your kid. Kids are terrible. They're amazing and they're wonderful, but they're also just little shits. Like, but you didn't cause me to touch the stove. Like,
yeah.
My God, yeah, and I have such a violent reaction now to anybody who kind of denies or tries to tell me to deny reality. I mean, I was at a doctor and they brought up, my eye injury came up because it was still fairly new, and they started kind of doing some poking and prodding. They're like, well, doctors don't know everything, and I'm like, I gotta go, because no, doctors don't know everything. It's medical practice. Like, we learn new stuff every day. I hope that my body gets donated to science. I want to further our understanding, but this person studied for half of my lifetime on this one specific subject, and their understanding about this will be infinitely more than mine, and if they say, hey, they showed me a picture of the inside of my eye and it's crushed, and if they say there's possibility that some of this will kind of be able to heal, but you're definitely going to have issues long term, we'll just kind of have to see how much of it can heal on its own, I'm going to believe them.
Yeah.
Like, and my eye is gone, my vision's gone from like 2100 to, it was 2030, and then my most recent one was 2040, but he said it can kind of fluctuate a little bit like that, and so I've gone from every 6 months to every 9 months appointments. Winning. Exercise is bad for you. Resistance bands are scary. 0 stars, do not recommend. But I mean, just it just the audacity, right? Like this is somebody who's studied and knows as much as we know, or has learned or tried to learn as much as we know as humans about this, and we're just gonna blow that off. Like,
yeah, the arrogance, right?
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, wow, they just don't know everything, and I'm like, no, but they know us damn sight sure more than me.
Yeah.
So, and that's comforting. That can be so comforting. Like, I go to PT for my neck, trying to avoid surgery, and they're there and they're like, well, try this, and I'm over here with this like study. I am mentally exhausted when I leave because I'm having to pay so much attention to this injury, and instead of just ignoring it, so that I can tell them how it hurts, where it hurts, when it hurts, so that they can fix it and help make it better. And is there a 100% guarantee? Absolutely not. Of course not. But there's more than a 0% guarantee of it helping.
Yeah.
So it's comforting when they can be like, hey, maybe this and maybe that. And then you see like a little bit of progress and you're like, oh my, there might actually be hope. Like, I can get through this,
Yeah.
Like,
I was talking with Elizabeth earlier about how coming out of a non-medical environment to a medical environment, one of the things that happens is, for some people, it's frustrating that medicine isn't perfect. Because again, we have no experience with it. We don't understand how it really works, that it's a science and it's imperfect and it's always evolving, and sometimes can be wrong, sometimes very wrong. But
especially for women.
The fact that, like, for my mother, for example, raising me with no medical stuff and not having to have insurance and pay for that, and not having to go to checkups and pay for that, it was simple. Like, whenever anything went wrong, you just throw a science and health at the kid and maybe call a practitioner if it's bad enough, and that costs something. But it's easy. There isn't like, and if it's easy because it doesn't work, obviously, but
yeah,
following medical rules and doing like what you're doing with rehab and PT, like, it's work, and you have to go to appointments and you have to pay for it, and you have to deal with insurance, and you have to like focus on the pain and tell the person what they need. it's a lot of work. It's
And
way
you have to do your
easier to just
daily at
sit
home exercises, and you have to, yeah.
it's way
It's a lot.
easier to just sit and read Science and Health and zone out and
Yeah,
disassociate, you know? It's way
yeah.
easier.
Just learn to live with it.
Yeah. And I can see,
No.
bizarrely, like, I can understand why that's appealing, you know? Because the fact is, like, many of these things, not all, but many, will sort of eventually kind of sort of go away
Yeah.
on their own,
The human body
you know?
can do amazing things and heal it. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, but it doesn't mean that we can't help.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm team doctor, obviously, but I can see, like, especially being a parent now, and my kids have been healthy. I've been very lucky, no accidents or anything. But there's still medical stuff. Like, there's still little things that crop up, and we've been in an ambulance, and we've been to the emergency room, and we've been to, an urgent care in the middle of the night. Like, we've done all that stuff.
Yeah.
And my mother didn't have to do any of that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was way easier.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's scary. That's a lot, but yeah, I mean, but I feel like your kids can trust that you're gonna help fix it.
Yeah, and that I'll take them seriously, and that I won't, blame them for it, or act annoyed
Yeah. I
that they're
I have
making
a
me do something. I hope. I hope I don't do that.
I have a scar on my chin. When I was 4, I cut my chin open. We were bouncing on the trampoline, and there was just this, we had a cover on the springs, but there was this one section that was like maybe 6 feet or less wide, that where the cover was too big and it like hung down. And trampoline tag is the second stupidest trampoline game, second only to Crack the Egg. So I'm playing with like 3 of my brothers, and so my feet are 6 feet in the air, right? And so as I'm coming down, I get tagged and hit, tag my legs, and so of course I like rotate, and I hit the springs, and and I'm 4 years old, and I roll into a patch of stickers because it's Texas and they're everywhere, and so I'm covered in thorns, and it was horrible, right? And I only have vague memories of it, right? Thankfully, but I remember, but all that really that I got, was. I don't know if I had like ice or just a towel or something kind of held to my chin, and we drove to the Leaves, which is the Christian Science facility. It was the place with the Band-Aids, I guess. I don't know what to, and
yeah, I've heard of that. I've heard of that one in Texas, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I got a butterfly Band-Aid, and they prayed at me, and then we went home, and and I do have vague memories of like looking in the mirror and seeing how bruised everything was, and it hurt and it ached, and every time I moved my foot, and it's the chin, right? Like, that hurts so bad, but shit happens, right? Like, kids do that. It just would have been nice for everybody if maybe Morgan got like 2 stitches or 5 stitches or something, and
some painkillers. Would have been nice. Children's Tylenol or something.
Yeah. Just easier on everybody.
Yeah. So at what point did you, like, was there a moment where you're like, I'm not a Christian Scientist anymore? Or was it just sort of, you were never really that?
I think I was never really that into it. I do remember really trying. I remember, I was at Cedars, and I really was trying, and doesn't matter how hard to try, but then I just kind of got, I'm a logical person. I like to follow, I'm a very emotional person too, but I like to follow the logic of stuff, and it just didn't make sense. And I'm reading fantasy books and, and stuff, and it's talking about all these different deity structures, and I start learning about like Norse gods and the pantheons there, and the Greek gods and the Romans, which are the same, and the Egyptian gods, and I started really liking the idea of multiple, like a pantheon, because it was just the concept of one omnipotent being just was too much. Like, I couldn't grasp it, like it was just impossible. And so I really liked the idea of these like specific, you pray to this one, you pray to this one kind of thing, and I kind of played around with that a little bit, but I don't think I ever really believed. But yeah, I don't know. I've repressed a lot, so working my way through that. But I know there was a small discussion where I told my mom that I didn't really want to have my religion forced on me, and then a screaming match a week later where she said that whether or not I wanted to, whatever. But
it didn't go over well when you
didn't go over well. Yeah, no.
Yeah, it didn't for me either.
Yeah.
That was the end of our relationship, basically, was when I told my mother I'm out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it didn't, I think my relationship with my mom is strained because of other stuff, but and I wish that wasn't the case, but kind of with that though, like, I know I'm still kind of on that question, but left field a little bit. I feel like Christian Science makes not just the medical field more difficult, but kind of everything, because you learn to not communicate. You learn how easy it is to ignore stuff and let it fester, Yeah. So anything like that in relationships, in friendships, in school, if you're struggling, it was impossible for me to talk to teachers when I was struggling because I felt stupid, and if you can't just be magically good at something, what's the point?
Yeah. So. And it also, like, for me, being raised in Christian Science taught me how to hide things.
Yeah.
Which I still have a problem with.
Yep.
And part of it is, for us, my mother made it very clear to me that if people knew what went on in our house, someone would take you away. Like, this was a threat that was used often. So it was always like, don't tell people what goes on here. I mean, I told people I was a Christian Scientist and probably preached at them a little more than they would have liked at times. But as far as like the medical stuff and things like that, I mean, I had exemption forms for school, but she was very clear that people don't understand this. People think it's dangerous. So you've got to be really careful who you talk about this with. Mm. And that, growing up with that, is really messed up.
Yeah.
You feel like you have to hide this thing to protect her. Basically, I was protecting her. That was super messed up.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't remember us having that kind of a discussion. I mean, I told people I was Christian Scientist, but I don't remember it being super hush-hush secret. And granted, we come from different generations, but so that's interesting that you say that too, because I don't remember it being a secret, but I do know that nobody understood. Yeah.
She had a lot of fear that something would happen to me medically, and that people would find out and, put me in foster care, basically.
Yeah.
Which she's just lucky that it didn't. I mean, there was this one, in all the times my sister and I have asked ourselves, would our mother have let us die? Would she have? And I asked her that once, and she unequivocally said, I'm not one of those demented CS moms. That's the term she used, demented CS mom. She's like, that never would have happened. I never would have let that happen. And she could be right. I'm not going to take that away from her, but there was an incident where I was around 11 or 12, and I thought it was my appendix. I don't know how I knew what that was, but I had this extreme abdominal pain, extreme gut-wrenching abdominal pain. And in my mind, I thought, oh my God, my appendix is bursting and I'm going to die. And it went on for hours and hours and hours. And I just lay in bed, writhing with pain and moaning and crying. And I'm sure she was calling a practitioner. I'm sure she was super freaked out, calling a practitioner, trying to get me to read something. And I do remember, and I'm sure she would regret this if she remembered it, she did tell me to quiet down or the neighbors would call the police.
And you're like, good.
Yeah, she did say that. She denied it later, but she did say that. And I remember being like, oh yeah, I've got to keep it in, because we don't want that to happen. And what happened with it? Well, eventually it just kind of stopped. After hours and hours of agony, it just kind of went away, and we'll never know what it was. But I for sure was in the worst pain of my life. It was very similar to childbirth, as I learned later, the pain that I had.
Yeah.
And so I don't, so she didn't know what was happening to me. It could have been my appendix, and I could have been dying, and she did not take me anywhere. So,
and it's that lack of education.
Yeah.
right? Like, I don't know how serious this could possibly be. And it's like, do you know what a rupturing appendix could do? Because
I'm
it's
sure
bad.
that thought
It's
crossed
ugly.
her mind, and yet she didn't call an ambulance. So this whole
Yeah.
thing of I'm not one of those demented CS moms, I'm like, aren't you
Yeah.
because I didn't die and I was okay, and it was probably some stupid minor thing that didn't end up being anything. But we
I don't know.
didn't know that.
So I had a similar when I was 20 probably 2021 and I had a pain like that. I actually freaked out my coworkers. I kind of enjoy telling this story to some of my friends. They were like, yeah, that sounds like you. I go into work and I shared an office with these two other young women about my age, and I'm in so much pain, and it's on my lower right side, and I'm sitting at my desk kind of like, this with my head like against my fist, and I haven't said anything, but I am exuding this aura of danger, right? And so the two of them are very uncomfortable and very quiet. And finally, at one point, I'm doing like the minimum work that I can get away with. And finally, I say, like very quietly, has either of you had appendicitis? And one of them's like, I have. Like, can you please describe the symptoms? And so she's like, yeah, this is okay. It's like, I believe that I might have that. And one of them was like, you don't sound like you're in pain. Which I'm like, yeah, I did. But I just remember looking over at her and going, would screaming help?
That's great.
That's so messed up. Like, you talk about, I mean, part of it, though, is like, you talk about how lucky, like, your son, your kids are healthy. And I know, like, a CS family, and they're all pretty healthy, and stuff like that. But it's also like, I really do wonder how much of that is due to evolution.
Interesting, yeah.
Because how many, we'll never know, right? There's not any records of how many people have died. And the strong ones who are saying that Christian Science worked and they survived and so they perpetuate it, that's terrible. But what that ended up being was an ovarian cyst. So that was probably what you were experiencing as well.
Oh.
If that gives you any kind of closure on that, it's a nightmare, horrific.
Yeah.
So
yeah. But yeah, my sister and I look at each other
pristine, so
extremely grateful that we survived.
Yeah.
Non-medical Christian Science childhoods,
Yeah.
Extremely grateful that we didn't come out with some, long-lasting, as far as we know, we talked about this earlier, but without any long-lasting ill physical effects.
Yeah.
That we know of. But, the psychological stuff is there, and that's kind of ongoing. I mean, it gets better with time. I mean, I can say that having been out probably 20 years-ish now, it's remarkable the difference. I mean, I could not have done this podcast even 7 years ago. There's no way. Like, I couldn't have had the clarity. I couldn't have had a sense of humor about it. It was very real and I was very angry and very triggered constantly. And, and that's just, all of that's gone. All of that, now I can really speak about it and step outside of it.
Yeah. I'm really glad.
Yeah.
It does kind of get me, though, how many, just because I watched the previous episodes of this that you had. I know that probably all humans do this, but it does kind of tickle me how much talking to other CS, former CS survivors and whatnot, talk about these debilitating injuries and just kind of like, yeah, and then I cut my face open and got a Band-Aid for it. Like, we just laugh at, like, oh my God. I found my favorite comedian because she was like, do you ever tell your friends a funny story and accidentally find out you were abused? And I was like, oh no.
Yeah. I was just going to say there's a meme floating around probably from that comedian about, like, you think you're telling this like flippant, like wacky story about your childhood, and you look around and everybody's like, are you okay?
Did I ruin lunch again? Like, sorry guys. And it just comes out at weird times. And it's one of those like I say, I kind of throw the word abuse around, but like, I mean, we were absolutely, denying someone access to healthcare, is absolutely abuse. But like our parents who denied it to us were also thoroughly abused. Even if they came into it late, even if they weren't raised in it like mine, you said, but like that, just the abusing mindset, you don't, it's psychological torture, and it's in there, and you just feel like a failure.
Yeah.
You feel like a failure as a person, and then as a parent, and then as like it just compounded. And then when somebody does survive, it's a self-perpetuating, it turns into a superstition, right? That's an accidentally confirmed bias. And so that's how the religion keeps going. But I am really glad that there's a whole thing against proselytizing with Christian Science.
Yeah.
I'm not over here counting churches as much, but I was taking a back road to a friend's house and definitely was like, la la la, and saw a building and looked at it, and it was a Christian Science church, and I definitely had a like, oh God, response. And the word practitioner catches me by surprise because it's such a great word, like a medical practitioner, a practitioner of the dark arts, whatever. You could use it for so many things, but it was, Christian Science practitioner was shorthanded so much to just practitioner as a kid that it's in there deep. And I have to kind of
trigger words. Yeah. At one point in the Facebook group, we had a thread of triggering words that sound normal, but to us like mean this other thing. And practitioner is definitely one. Demonstration.
Yeah.
Mortal mind, magnetism.
The testimony, giving testimony. I kind of still test myself every once in a while. Like I can still do the 7 synonyms, but I think I've almost forgotten the scientific statement of being. Like I'm not even positive on the name of it. Yes.
Right, isn't it? Going away. It's going away.
Because like I love singing. I'm in a singing group, and that's always been a thing. My family growing up was very musical. My mom taught music, things like that. And I remember, her singing the hymns to us, and it was always very sweet and wonderful and beautiful. And I hate losing that, but like,
yeah,
I cannot stand it, and I can't stand any religion really at this point. But
well, all these groups also use music as a tool. This is something I've learned recently. Yeah. And I don't think it's intentional. I don't think it's like a malicious thing. It's just every group like this knows that music is a very bonding experience for groups of people, and it's very emotional. And it is something that keeps you in. And it's something I've seen in our group talked about a lot, is like one of the last things we're willing to give up is like a hymnal.
Yeah.
Or, I still have a hymnal. I still have it. It's buried away somewhere where I can't look at it every day, but it's still there. And recently my family and I were on a trip, and I don't know why it came up. We were talking about hymns or music or something. And somebody asked me to like, if I remembered any of the hymns, and I hadn't thought about them in decades at this point, but I busted out "Oh Gentle Presence," every word.
That's a core memory. Okay. Yeah.
And honestly, it wasn't a bad experience because I have distance now. And I was able to see it for what it is, which is this charming little 19th century hymn that doesn't mean anything to me anymore.
Yeah, I was in a hotel room just this last weekend doing a gig with my singing group, and we turned on the light, found the light switch, how it always is, kind of hunting, and my friend said, let there be light, and I immediately, like it always does, it popped in my head, and there was like what chased the clouds away, and and all of us now watching this are like, oh God, like there it is, kind of blindsided. But and I mean, I miss the closeness and the community of that, but I don't miss the guilt, I don't miss the shame, I don't miss any of that. And I was talking to one of my brothers recently, and he said something that I'm still kind of processing. So just kind of throwing this out there for anyone who wants it. But he said that a lot of culture comes from religion, and not necessarily all of it, but like getting rid of religion can do a lot of damage to cultures. Like if you come here and like Catholicism, you get, and just any of them. And so if you're going to get rid of religion, and this kind of come togetherness and belief system and the rituals that originally started to, you know, keep people safe. Like you cleanse your feet and your hands before this, and how to care for the dead, and how to grieve the dead, and the steps and the rituals and the processes there. If you're going to get rid of the thing that originally housed that, you need to replace it with something, because humans want that community. We require that community. Individualism is a lie. It's a horrible, horrible myth. And so I'm still processing that. I'm still working on that. But that was interesting to me. So I think all of us seek that community, that loss of, you know, but also just trying to understand and find solidarity and know that we're not alone and we're not lost, and, you know, we're going to be okay, you know? Yeah. And like, what do I do about this? And
that's an important point, that you can't just take that away and not find ways. Void. Yeah, you can't just leave a void for people, because people do crave that community, and they do crave ritual, and they crave music and singing together and dancing together and all those things that we've done since ancient times, because it fulfills a human bonding need.
Yeah, the first thing babies do when they, you know, is sing, you know, as they're, you know, kind of people are talking, the first thing they can do when they stand is dance. And like, these are just human things. They're not, you know, so kind of designated. But
I mean, I'm glad that we live in a time, this is one of the positive things that I think comes from the internet and social media, is if you're so inclined, you can find like-minded people to group with, either online and or in real life. Like my entire life is the swing dancing community, and I make a career out of it. And it's the people I've known for 30 years now.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I didn't have that, I don't know what, like that fulfills my communal needs and my needs for coming together and celebrating and enjoying life. And again, dancing with people and touching other people.
Oh my gosh, the touch starvation in our country. Yes.
Yeah. Yes. And so that to me replaced, not that Christian Science was ever felt communal to me. Like it was actually kind of the opposite of that in my experience, but
it was very isolating.
Yeah. It was even very weird and cold,
very isolated,
like yucky. But, you know, we all need something, whatever it may be for you. We need a group thing that we can do that's healthy, that's not culty, or at least minimally culty. Like I think swing dancing is minimally culty.
I joke about it so much. I mean, laugh or cry, right? I think that's kind of where it comes down to. But like with my, you know, a couple of my siblings and then some of my friends, whenever we find ourselves in a group thing that's not necessarily our thing, and it's kind of just happening around us, so we might be a little bit confused, it keeps turning into this thing of like, did we accidentally join another cult? What's going on?
Yeah.
Like, guys, you would tell me if this was a cult, right? And they're like, oh my God, Morgan, you can't just... I'm like, look, fool me once. You know, I'm writing a D&D campaign, and I'm like, yeah, you know, talking to one of my brothers about it, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to have the characters, like, when they get to about this level, kind of find this, and it's going to be a cult that they have to find here, and, you know, write what you know, and he just, like, dies laughing. I mean, you got to make light of it, but...
Yeah. But yeah, we need our group things. I'd rather people found that kind of community and group thing without having to believe things that always somehow make you anti-LGBTQ or anti, you know, woman, or like we just have something that doesn't involve those things.
It's crazy how much one fear opens the door to so many other fears. Like if you're afraid of dying and you find somebody who tells you, I know exactly what happens when you die, there's no need to be afraid of it, except if you do these things, then you're like, okay, well, I won't do those things. And then it just gets to be that, like, and also you have to do this, and also you have to do this, and it's give an inch, take a mile, kind of, you know, kind of set up, and I don't like it. You know, I want people to have, and I struggle with that, because I want people to have something that brings them, that they can look to, that brings them peace, that brings them courage, that brings them strength and community. You know, how can that be a bad thing? How can that be a bad thing? But it's stagnating when you put the box around it, you know, and you say, never this shall change. This is how it has always been for 4,000 years, you know? Like,
not exactly always, but okay.
Yeah, and or less. I mean, what was Christian Science in the 1910s or something like that. I don't even know.
Yeah,
So
it's
I
only
mean,
about, it's less than 200 years old at this point.
yeah.
Like
I mean,
150, if that.
so I just don't get. I don't get it. I don't get it, and it'll never make sense to me. But I want people to have that thing that brings them comfort. If it's ice cream, if it's calling your friends, if it's snuggling your animals, if it's believing in the universe, if it's, the mother void of space, if it's God, whatever you call it, but I would like it to stop being shoved down my throat. And I'd like it to stop causing war crimes. Small requests.
Like yeah. Yeah, I mean, I definitely get the impression, I always say I don't know, because I don't really keep in touch with any Christian Scientists, so I don't know for sure, but I get the impression that most people that are still in it now, especially that are younger, not really doing the thing. Like they're going to doctors, they're getting vaccines, especially with COVID, getting the vaccine, and they're just kind of doing like Christian Science light, which, I'll take it. Like if it's going to keep your kids safe, if it's going to remove that creepy medical part, which can be super dangerous and lethal and all those things, and you can have an elderly life devoid of, miserable pain, great. I mean, I still would rather people not believe in things that are patently false. But, if you must, at least take the sharp edges off of it and just be like, well, God is love and it's all about love. And it's like, okay, if it makes you a better person, if it makes you nicer to your neighbor and more helpful and kind and honest, well, I can't argue with it,
But I always go back to Penn from Penn and Teller, Penn Jillette in that interview, because he's like, this famous atheist or whatever, and somebody was asking him like, so what's stopping you from murdering and stealing and raping, all this stuff? And he's like, nothing. I murder and steal and rape all that I want, but I don't want to do those things. Do you want to do those things? And the only thing stopping you is this figure looking over your shoulder and tallying it up and threatening you to have a terrible afterlife, which you don't even. Ooh, you should self-examine,
Yeah, if that's the only reason that you're not engaging in sociopathic behavior is fear of something bad happening to you, that you might want to rethink that. It's not just that we live in a society and there's like a social contract that we behave a certain way and take. It's
like if you could do anything you wanted, right? Like if you could do anything you wanted, and it's like I would start community gardens and I would do a bunch of writing and I would teach people to read and I'd make sure that and I'm like, my crazy fantasy thought is taking care of people.
Right. It gets so wacky. I just want everyone to be housed and get the medical care they need free of charge.
What a concept.
Crazy. So so is there anything else you wanted to talk about as far as like where you're at now, how things are with your family relationships, anything like that?
I don't I kind of took some notes. I think I kind of hit everything there. I mean, where I am now is processing what my brother said about finding something to replace, to fill that void, because I've got a great community, but that one hit me kind of, it's on the back burner, I call it. But I like that. But I mean, I go to doctors as much as I can. We live in a nightmare capitalistic hellscape, so I mean,
working your way through that system, yeah,
kind of navigating that however we can. But yeah, it's just not something that I support, that I am a proponent of in any way, and I you can't skip steps for people. So like, I want to make sure that I'm always available, which I don't do a great job of making myself safe to people because I am so like outspoken about like, and so if people are looking for that kind of calm feeling, that's maybe not me, but I'd like to be able to help people get out of that, but you can't skip steps for people. You can just kind of be available and make the resources that helped you available. And
I mean, that's my hope for this podcast, is that people can just listen to people's experiences, see what resonates with you, what doesn't. I mean, when I was coming out of all this 20 years ago, there was literally nothing, and it would have been so helpful to just go, oh my God, that happened to me too. Oh my God, that happened to me too. I'm not crazy. Like I'm having all the same
crazy.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what this is my hopefully my little gift
I like it.
to people is just listen to us talk. Listen to us what we think about and how we've been there, and everybody's kind of in a different place, but I like to think that we're better off out of it. I consider
I feel like
myself
I
a
am.
free thinker now, and that's important to a good life. So
For sure. Yeah, and I mean, even if it reaches, I like your podcast idea. I mean, even if it reaches a person, that's one person more than it.
yeah, that's enough.
If it didn't exist, but and I feel like as you do more of this, and as it gets kind of more views and things like that, and it'll kind of expose my hope, my goal, my invisible goal for you is that it gets more public notice, and then people are like, hey, maybe we should get rid of those laws allowing child abuse.
Yeah. I mean that's definitely like the dream.
For sure.
All right, Morgan. Well, it was great talking to you, and
Sure.
we may do this again. I'd love to do some part 2s with people as it goes along. But I'll see you in the group. We can post some snarky memes and
my favorite.
Yeah.
You had the 2 questions I wanted to jump with. I think it's pretty clear. I think it's pretty clear that I think Christian Science is a cult, but only because I also think all religions are a cult. So like, find what makes you happy and makes you strong and gives you strength, but like, maybe don't be creepy about it.
Yeah.
Terrible.
You're probably still in a cult, but that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other one was about Mary Baker Eddy, right?
Is she a shyster or a true believer in your opinion?
Honestly, I was thinking about that. I couldn't care less. Like, no idea, and I can't be fucked. I mean, like, I know enough about her. I don't care to know enough about her. I think I did like a quick Wikipedia skim and was like, it just
your eyes glazed over.
Yeah. So I don't. Was she a Probably. Was she a believer? I don't care.
Doesn't really matter now.
He's dead. I feel the same about her as the founding fathers. You know what? They did a thing. They're gone now. They would be confused at the sight of a banana. Let's move forward. Like, here's a cat meme. And an automatically opening door. Your mind is blown. So I don't care.
Yeah, well, that is a completely legitimate response to that question.
Millennial.
Yeah.
But thank you so much. I mean, I really this you reached out to me a couple days ago, and I'm glad that we were able to connect quickly. And I mean, I definitely had some thinking to do, and I'm glad I was able to talk to somebody to kind of put it out there and
sort of articulate your experience. Yeah, for somebody. I'm sure, again, if it only reaches one person who says, "Oh, I totally relate to that," that's a job well done. So
yeah. So keep on it.
All right.
Thanks for listening to Leaving Christian Science. Disclaimer: I'm not an expert. I'm not a historian. I'm not a therapist. I'm just an ordinary, imperfect human who had the misfortune of being born into Christian Science. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the guests and do not necessarily represent those of the host. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to replace professional, medical, legal, or psychiatric advice.